Hey guys, this is Greg with Medical Muscle. And in this video, I get to interview one of my longtime friends in medical school, Nisha. Nisha's got a great story. I think it's important for you guys to hear. Nisha, can you tell everybody who you are and what you ended up matching in?
Yeah, so my name's Nisha Gill. I'm currently a fourth year medical student at St. George's University. I'm also the incoming vascular integrated resident at Albany Medical Center.
Fantastic. This is what I want to share with you guys. Vascular surgeon here. Okay, so you can explain how many IMG vascular surgeons were there this year?
In terms of US IMGs, which is the category that I fall into because I'm a US citizen, there were only three of us that matched into vascular surgery this year.
Well, so for the people who don't know, what is vascular surgery?
Yeah, vascular surgery, it's a very dynamic field. You can have a clinic lifestyle, you can have an OR lifestyle, so you can have, slow and fast pace, but it's essentially exactly what it sounds like, which is treatment of the pathologies of the vasculature. Arterial diseases, venous diseases kind of gets handled by a vascular surgeon.
Very cool. And there's very limited spots for this very competitive specialty, which means you have to have the good scores. And I have to say, knowing Nisha, that she has always gone up and above the general requirements. Like, obviously, you have to have good scores. You were the treasurer of IEA, the Honor Society, like things like that. What other clubs were you part of?
So I kind of already had an interesting background. I have degrees in criminology and human development, which are not science degrees by any stretch of the imagination. I, was in a sorority, and so there's a bunch of different things that kind of paint different pictures of who I am. In medical school, I was part of the Medical Student Research Initiative, and I also, as you said, was a member of IEA, our Medical Honor Society, and then also part of the e-board as their treasurer. So kind of a lot going on. In the clinical years, I also, with a friend, started a general surgery interest group. At the time, we were both probably going to be applying to general surgery, which is something that I also did this year. And we started a group for people who are transitioning from their basic science years to their clinical years because there really wasn't anything that helped give out advice in a platform like that.
Yeah, which is very important because especially going into surgery, the surgical specialties, they're very competitive, and there's a lot of boxes that you got to check that's not obvious. I feel like that can help you stand out as an applicant. So if you guys would like to join Nisha's group, it's on Instagram. I'll link that below. What's the name again?
On Instagram, it's surge.interest, and on Facebook, it's just General Surgery Interest Group.
Perfect. So I'll link those two below for you guys. Through your journey of getting into this specialty, what do you think are things that helped you, kind of stand apart?
I think a big part of it was just the fact that I was an IMG, kind of coming from where I came from and wanting to pursue such a hard specialty to get into. On the way, I wanted to make sure that I was able to do everything that I possibly could to give myself the best chances of matching into the specialty. And one of the biggest things that I wound up doing that helped me a lot was finding a mentor in the field. Most medical specialties have national organizations that you can join as a medical student, oftentimes for free. And I wound up joining the American College of Surgeons, and they had a student tab and then a research tab because I was interested in conducting research in this field.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to find a very prolific vascular surgeon researcher in the area who was looking for a medical student to help with some projects. So I contacted him, and he wound up becoming a mentor for me down the road. So that was a huge, huge thing. If you're not interested in research, which I know a lot of people shudder when I say the word research, is you can also do specialty focused extracurricular activities. Like I mentioned, I started that interest group on social media.
Yeah.
Other things you can do is volunteer time at clinics in underserved communities, that kind of stuff.
I think finding a mentor is very important. There's a lot of little things that it's hard to know at medical student level. I had some really good mentors in the psych department, and that changed how I thought about the field, like what I wanted to do in the future. So there's a lot of benefits with that. One thing that I noticed with Nisha is that she's been in this long-term, long-distance relationship with her significant other. That's one aspect of medical school that can be quite challenging. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. I've been with my now fiance, at the time boyfriend, when I started medical school. We've been together now 11 years. He proposed when I was living in Granada, and we're getting married this May. And Greg will be there to help us celebrate. So that will be very exciting.
Yeah,
Uh,
I know. Congratulations. I mean, it's so cool to be able to match in something cool. And then you got a wedding, and so a lot of cool things happening. Any advice for people who are dealing with long distance relationships?
I think for us, what was really nice was that we had a very strong foundation when I started medical school. And part of this was making sure that we were compatible with each other. I felt very supported in going to medical school and still feel very supported in pursuing a surgical residency because of how compatible we are.
Mm.
Andrew constantly says little things like, we're going to do this together. When we move to Albany together, when we're in residency together, we'll get through it together. He even says stuff like, when you're working overnights, I'll cook dinner and I'll bring you food to the hospital if you want, which is really nice. I mean, just little things to show that he supports this and that there is no, and there probably will never be any resentment towards me for putting us through this, because that was always a really big fear of mine when going into medicine, is that I'm taking such a perfect relationship and now I'm going to put time and distance into it.
Mm.
And you can never really know how that can shake out. So the foundation, the compatibility, it was all there.
You made so many good points in that, because in some ways, when someone decides to go into medicine, and I can say this from personal experience, is that there has to be some give on the other side, because it's just such a huge commitment, and quite often these things don't work out. And so I think communication is really important, but also just like support, knowing what you guys are getting into is really important.
You definitely have to have good communication and also just making time for each other. For us, it was easy the first year because I lived with him during our COVID pandemic year when I was online with school. So that benefited us in a lot of ways. We got to spend that extra year together. But then, the second year of medical school came, and the third, where I did add both distance and time into that equation. We had never been long distance. And then all of a sudden, I packed up and moved to a Caribbean country. But I think what helped us the most during that time was making time for each other. Every single night, we'd give each other a phone call. If it was short, if it was long, it didn't really matter. Just to let each other know that, you're important to me and I will make time for you no matter what.
So cool. So cool. What are some like study tips that you have for students that want to get into like a really competitive specialty?
In terms of studying in the basic science years, and also in the clinical years, like your third year when you take shelves, I think it was really important for me to find a group of friends to study and essentially struggle with. Greg wound up being one of those friends. We have many friends in our friend group who we would study with regularly. It's nice to know that there's people like you going through the same stuff as you. That being said, probably a bigger part of this is that you also need to find out how you study specifically. It took me a while to realize that every person studies differently. So, what worked for some of my friends didn't really work for me, and vice versa. So, the sooner you find out how best you study, the better.
Yeah, totally. 100%. I agree. Some people just have photographic memories, and they can just take in certain information, they can just float through it. Some can't. Some like Anki, some don't. But to go back to your point on friends, I 100% agree. You're the average of your friends, right? So if your friends are all doing well, then you're going to end up doing well too. We also went out and did the fun stuff. I think we got dinners, as a big group with our whole study group. I think it's important because then you share study tips, and then there's emotional support, getting through the tough stuff. And then you can also like quiz each other. Yeah, we would all be studying, and then someone would sit up and make a comment or a question. And then we'd all start like maybe debating on what the answer is. So it's a good learning environment.
For sure.
Yeah. So what are some things that you did in the basic science years that really helped you?
I think for me specifically, again, it may not work for everyone. I loved Anki. I did Anki every day, weekends or not, holidays or not. I kept up with it. And not only just for the certain blocks that we were studying in, but I would make sure to do reviews more frequently than that. So in a way, I was already studying for STEP and I was already studying for BSFCR.
Mm.
And then similarly in my clinical rotations, I would do the same thing where I would kind of highlight the core specialty that I was in and make that my primary goal. But in a way, I was also reviewing all the old material. And so I was constantly studying for STEP in that way as well.
Mm. And this was all through basic sciences.
Yes, I did Anki through basic sciences as well as through the clinical years, but in basic sciences specifically, I loved using Anki.
Interesting. Yeah. I loved Anki. I stopped using it. I fell out of love with it, but I'm starting to use it again because I'm doing some pre-studying for step 3. So I'm realizing that, it's so efficient. You can just download a deck and just do a certain amount of cards every day. I do them at night. Helps me sleep.
Nice.
And
I think a big part of that was also when I would get questions wrong in UWorld, especially when I studied for step 1 and step 2, when I would get questions wrong, I would find specific cards that targeted that question and I would put them in a brand new deck. So I was reviewing all the material that I was supposed to have learned, but I was also reviewing the stuff that I know that I had gotten wrong in the past and hopefully not make those same mistakes.
yeah, yeah, using that tool. But everybody's going to find what works for them. Some people like Forwards and Beyond or sketchy if that's their jam. Do you have any advice for students that are in the clinical years, like if they want to do a surgical special, like letters of rec or anything like that, anything in the OR, any hints on that?
So for surgery specifically, I think going into it with some base knowledge of how you pre-op a patient, stuff that you want to look for post-operatively, because they're great pimping questions on the floors. When you're in the OR, you should hopefully before getting there have read up on whatever case you're going into. So if you're seeing a cholecystectomy, you'll want to know what are the indications for this procedure, what are common complications for this procedure, and then just very basically, like what are the steps of the procedure, because it's easier to watch something like that when you know what to anticipate next. Also, a lot of times as medical students, they give you the opportunity to either close or tie knots. And so learning some basic suture skills, which you can easily YouTube, or there's always books and other resources on Amazon or something like that. Very basic how to do a knot. That way, when you get there, you can impress people with that.
Yeah, that's true. I remember having to learn my knots, and I just realized that for me, I'm good. I don't have to have that. It was interesting. I did enjoy being in the OR. I liked the organization. I think if you want to get into surgery, and these are things that I've observed in the OR, the kind of personality type, you have to be someone who is good at taking the lead. But I think with Nisha, and I see this with other really good surgeons, they're very organized. You have to be a very organized person. I think it shows through these residencies when you take on the role of like president or treasurer of some group, you can organize some kind of group and balance good grades. You're good at managing a lot of things, and you need to do that in the OR, right? I mean, you got to manage a bunch of different people. You're kind of the one calling the shots on.
Yeah, organization, adaptability for sure.
Ability.
Things
Yeah,
go wrong. I mean, people are going to be looking to you, someday
sure.
for the answer. So you got to be able to think quickly on your feet, be adaptable.
Yeah, correct. All right, well, Nisha, thank you so much for having this talk with me. And again, if you guys would like to reach out to Nisha, I'll link her personal Instagram. What's that at?
My personal one is it's Nisha_Dillip.
Okay, perfect. And then we already put the surgery interest group down below. So you guys, wish you the best of luck on this whole process. If you're in third year, good luck. And keep kicking butt, guys.